Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm just going to wait for a minute for a few more people to join us before we kick off. Okay, I think hopefully everyone's with us now. It's very difficult because I can't see people's faces, so we're just looking at the screen of the panelists. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today for this legacy event. It's fantastic that over 260 people are joining us today, hopefully, and that's wonderful that so many of you are interested in hearing about how important gifts in wills are to the Royal Osteoporosis Society. My name is Kathy Adcock. I'm the Interim Membership and Individual Giving Manager at ROS. And before I introduce our wonderful speakers, just a little bit of housekeeping. The session is being recorded and we will send out the recording next week. We've got quite a packed itinerary today, so there may not be time to answer questions during this session. But if you pop them into the chat, we'll endeavour to answer as many as possible and send those with the recording next week. And any links that we talk about today, again, we'll put those in the chat and those will be sent in the recording as well. So I hope you're going to find this session really useful and interesting. I'm now going to introduce Craig. Craig is the CEO at the ROS, and he joined us from the Advertising Standards Authority, where he was Director of Communications. He has held leadership roles in membership bodies over the last decade and has sat on the board of the Royal College of Anaesthetists for 2 terms. He also served as a lay member of the National Organ Donation Committee at NHS Blood and Transplant. Craig practiced as a government lawyer in a Home Office, and in 2006 he applied his experience of advocacy to a leading children's charity successful campaign for new investment for socially excluded young people. Following that outcome, he was invited by a cabinet minister to oversee stakeholder engagement for the Quality Act. Craig, I believe you're going to give us a bit of an update on ROS. Over to you.
I will. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. What I'd like to do is to give you an update on our plans leading up to 2030. And it's a really good time to do that because we've already changed the landscape when it comes to osteoporosis, thanks to the breakthrough commitment of all 3 main political parties last year to a national rollout of early diagnosis services. So we've got hope, excitement, a lot of buzz at the moment because we've never had a big offer from government to roll out preventative services. And that gives us the confidence that we can change the health system and public life as a whole for the benefit of all of our members. So let me tell you what led up to these changes and also what's coming next. I'm going to show you some slides and perhaps Kathy can give me a nod if they're up.
Yeah, all good, Craig.
Good, thank you. So this is about transforming bone health in the UK, our vision leading up to 2030. I'd like to talk first of all about what gives us the courage to advocate as strongly as we have on behalf of our members. The first is this: people severely underestimate the number of people affected by this condition. So whenever I sit down with ministers, with number 10 advisors, I always start by saying, look, half of women over the age of 50 will suffer fractures because of this condition, and a fifth of men of that age as well. And we know that we've been pushing back against a stereotype, a very wrong and misleading stereotype, that broken bones are somehow trivial. So we often show this graph here, which shows that when it comes to very sadly years lost to disability and premature death, fragility fractures is number 4 on the list. So this is a really serious condition when it comes to life shortening and life worsening health conditions, and that's been underestimated. And of course, we can prevent a lot of this if we get ahead of people's fractures and we control the condition. We can completely change the figures in this graph, but it needs action. And it's worth reminding ourselves about where we're starting from. Despite the fact that there are today safe, effective, highly affordable medications available in the NHS for osteoporosis, two-thirds of the people who need them are missing out on them. So of the 3.5 million people who live with the condition, two-thirds aren't on medication who should be, and probably that's because they don't know they've got the condition because diagnosis is so late. The effect of this is that we have a revolving door in hospitals of fracture patients who are in and out. One in five have 3 or more breaks before finally getting a diagnosis. So their access to those therapies, their access to that lifestyle advice is coming really late, only after fractures which have severely diminished quality of life. And lots of people on the call will know all about that, very sadly. Now, the effect of this, or a good symptom of it, really, a good indicator or illustration of it, is that 2.6 million of us have undiagnosed spinal fractures. And the reason for that is that 70% of them never come to medical attention. So that's the scale of the treatment gap that we're pushing back on. And as lots of people on the call will know, ultimately, if we don't treat osteoporosis for too many people, the end result will be a broken hip. And that really affects people's mobility, people's independence, comes with a risk of early death, very sadly. But the really good news is that half of people who had a hip fracture uh, did have a minor fracture, which could and should have flagged them as being at risk if we got there earlier. And of course, it's people who live in the most deprived areas who suffer the most. So the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, was in Blackpool this week talking about this phenomenon across the whole health service. In other words, the people who need the care the most are the least likely to get it. And that's absolutely the case when it comes to bone health. So people in deprived areas live with more fractures, they take longer to recover in hospital, they die in greater numbers after broken hips. Here's an example of a lady who's been really brave in telling her story. She's called Anne. And Anne was told when she was 42 years old that she had the bones of an 80-year-old, according to her doctor, which must have been a flattening thing to say and to hear. She had searing pain when she picked up the kettle, had to cope with it for a whole year before she finally had scans, which showed 2 fractures in her spine. As a result, she's lost an inch in height because of the compression. She has pain in her stomach. She permanently uses a stick now and has aids around the house, such as a shower lift and toilet lift. And she says that her social life has disappeared. She feels under a house arrest, as she puts it, because of the effect of the condition on her life. And, we want to step in so that there's an early diagnosis and access to treatment for everybody, but particularly people like Anne. Here's a man I know really well. Stephen Robinson is from the Northeast. He's near Richmond in Yorkshire. And in 2017, when he was 64 years old, he started getting severe pain in his back. And he went to see the GP 10 times. And the GP was adamant every single time. The GP said, "You're working on forklifts, you're loading and unloading wagons. This is because of your job. And if you stop doing the job, you'll stop having the pain." So after the 10th GP visit, the pain didn't stop. And the job had to because he just couldn't do it anymore. Stephen was forced out of that job at the age of 61. And when he finally paid privately to have a DEXA scan, which isn't very easy when you've had to leave your job, he was told he had 10 spinal fractures, which had been undiagnosed. And they needn't have happened. They could have been detected much sooner, and we could have spared Steve those lost years of his life and let him do what he wanted to do, which was to stick in his job and carry on working. So our strategy, which we launched in 2022, is all about changing this picture. And we know we're never going to change it unless we push osteoporosis right up to the top of the public health agenda, where it deserves to be, given those statistics I told you at the beginning. And we do mass market public campaigning to warn people who are likely to be at higher risk that they if they break bones, it may be because of the condition and they should push themselves forward for an assessment. And we're helped in doing this by building partnerships and advocates, really, that we've never had before, who are standing up for all of us, for the people on this call, for our members, people who are making our case in the press. The lady on the right is Ruth Sunderland. She is business editor of the Daily Mail. She's launched the War on Osteoporosis campaign. It's run for 30 weeks now. You can see Stephen there, the gentleman I just spoke about. And Stephen told his story in the Sunday Express, which launched a parallel campaign, and that's been going even longer. That's been going now for 80 weeks, calling for the rollout of these early diagnosis services. So we've had two national newspapers, rivals even, campaigning for our people, our community at the same time. And they've been winning that battle in the press. They've been raising awareness across the country. The Express campaign has been the longest newspaper campaign on record in this country. We're very proud of that. And having a campaign like this has enabled us to build alliances and partnerships and get advocates from places that we didn't used to have friends. A good example is in Parliament, where 244 members have backed us and said we want these early diagnosis services called fracture liaison services rolled out everywhere, that it's not fair that only half of trusts have them. And as a result, we got into a position last year where, going into the election campaign, all three main political parties pledged to roll out these services to every part of the country by 2030. Wes Streeting, the current Health Secretary, called it an unmissable campaign. He talked about his aunt's experience of a hip fracture and was very clear in saying that if she had access to an FLS, one of these early diagnosis services, then her pain, her disability could have been prevented. And the two other parties pledged the same. Wes Streeting said the rollout plan would be one of his first acts in post. We're waiting for the details next week in his 10-year plan. But this is what he said about the case we made. And you can see the volunteers in their pink jumpers there, the people who made the case direct to the party conferences. Wes Streeting said this: "You've built a really good evidenced example of what really good secondary prevention looks like. And these services are not just good for preventing injury amongst patients, you're also doing the taxpayer a service through saving money. We made the promise and we're keeping the promise." And when the promise is kept, we will be in a position to stop and prevent 74,000 fractures over 5 years. 31,000 of those fractures will be hip fractures. And given the early mortality rate from hip fractures, we expect to save 8,000 lives over that period. And of course, in addition to this, we've got these FLSs coming. They are going to catch people after the first break and give them access to medication. Now, whether people want the medication is up to them, but we want to make sure that everybody who's entitled to medication has early access to it. And there are two really exciting new medications. This organization, ROS, campaigned really hard in 2021 for romosozumab, a bone builder, an anabolic therapy, to be allowed in the UK, in England, I mean. And we got NICE to reverse their decision and give people access to that drug. We said it was unfair that people in Scotland had access and people in England did not. And we were happy to provide the patient perspective to the discussions on abaloparatide, the newer drug, which was also agreed for use last year. So for people who would benefit from these therapies, who are the right kind of people for these therapies, they're not right for everybody. It depends on medical circumstances, but they're going to make a big difference because they don't just slow down the loss of bone density, they also build back lost bone density as well. So we're really happy to have those in the armory of therapies to beat this disease. And as I said at the beginning, the strategy is not just about pushing osteoporosis to the top of the health agenda. And, I'm now satisfied it's way up there compared to what it was. I haven't seen any other condition covered in the media like we've been. I've not seen another condition attract 244 parliamentarians in support of it. So that's the progress on the political side. But we also needed to get over that public awareness challenge that we've got, because still very few of us think about our bones as we're growing up. Even though our bones peak in our 30s, only a minority of people think about bone health, and only a minority of those take action for it. So we wanted to prime the people who are likely to be at the highest risk. And that's why we created our risk checker that you can see on the front page of the website. That is a 5-minute test. It'll ask about 10 questions. It'll give people a risk assessment. If you're low risk, it'll help you with tips on how to stay that way as we get older. If you're high risk, it'll give you advice on how to have a really good conversation with your GP to get an urgent assessment. And since the Queen, Her Majesty, launched this with us in 2022, over 3 years, we've enabled 450,000 people to check their risk. So they're people who are stepping forward for that assessment early if they need it. And the effect of that is that over 58,000 of them have got an early diagnosis, according to the independent statistician who analyzes the responses when people tell us what happened next. So we're really proud of that. That is people presenting early, getting the help they need early, knowing what to do to stay low risk if they are lucky enough to be low risk. And we're going to scale that up even further. Now, getting people an early diagnosis is only part of the picture. We know that we need to be on hand because the NHS is still not in a very good condition. People are waiting a long time for test results. They have unanswered questions on medication. We hear too many stories where people being told, come and get your medication by text message. They come and there's very little follow-up and they don't know what to do as a result. And we've seen record calls to our specialist nurse helpline for that reason. So we will keep our nurses answering those calls. We'll make sure they're on the other end of the phone for people who need questions answered. And I'm going to finish by talking about our vision for the next steps, because this FLS rollout is due to be completed in 2030. So there is a good time to aim for in terms of the other things we want to change. The first is this: we want to hold the governments to account on their promises on these services. That means Wes Streeting in England. It means Wales, where we've already secured FLS in every health board, but we want to make sure they're the right quality. It means Holyrood, where we'll be doing an event next month. So if you're in Northern Ireland, we've not forgotten. We will be there very soon this summer. And in Scotland as well, where we've secured a public audit into osteoporosis services in the Scottish FLS. So when we have the results of that audit, we'll be campaigning for change there as well. Now, FLS is just about preventing the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth fractures, but we want to stop the first as well. And I'm really glad Caroline is here. She's going to talk about research soon. And the priority that we've put when it comes to research is on making the case for a national screening program. There's really exciting research that shows that we can prevent 8,000 hip fractures every single year once we've got one. All we need to do is persuade the National Screening Committee to change their mind on 4 out of 19 checkpoints. We've already got 15 out of 19 agreed by them, and the research that we are committed to and making happen will make the case for the remaining 4. Finally, we will carry on stepping up for that unprecedented extra demand on our helpline. And we'll go further than that. We'll make sure that there are digital resources available, videos that answer common questions, webinars. Our Bone Matters webinar series has recorded its millionth view. So this is really good reach for people who might not necessarily need a helpline call, but do have questions that could be answered with lots of other people being present. And what I would really like to do over the coming months is to make progress in launching these 4 new programs. We've just launched a new program called BoneMed Online. It's fantastic. It helps people stick to their treatment regime. It helps people get the best out of their medication. And I'm already hearing some good reviews of it from people who've benefited. If you're interested, it's on our website, and it reaches a lot of people in an online way. And it's showing that we can change lives at scale if we complement our telephone advice with advice for people online that can reach many thousands of people at once. But there's more we can do there, and these are the things I really want to do. There are plans which are carefully costed, carefully designed services which are ready on the shelf for implementation if we can fund them. The first is a mass market digital program for people who are newly diagnosed, because we know that's a really sensitive time for people. The second is a program of live exercise classes, because we know that exercise is something that people are very unsure about when they've had fractures. It's important for people to do, but if there are questions on how to do it in a way that's safe. The third is an AI-led chatbot to deliver advice and information at scale, because lots of charities are showing that they can answer simple inquiries through AI, and we would like to do that as well. And finally, a journey to a bit like the Bone Med Online to support people who've had spinal and hip fractures as well. So these are programs which are all ready to go. They're designed, they're planned, we've got the content organized, we've got the budgets arranged, but we need to secure funding for them. And when we have, these will make a really big difference in making sure that when those FLSs, those fracture liaison services, are diagnosing tens of thousands more people, and when they then come to the charity and our helpline nurses struggle to answer all calls on the first time people ring, it'll mean there are big digital programs with lots of reach that can give people some of the answers they want to simpler inquiries. And that means the helpline nurses can be reserved for those in the greatest need and with the greatest complexity of challenges. We're going to carry on pushing our risk checker to people who are at high risk. So far, we've marketed it to women aged 45 to 54, but we'll be scaling that up later this year. It's called the Great British Bone Check, and I'm very excited that we've got support from Boots and AXA insurers to roll that out to their customers. I would like to get to a place where we've not just got 500,000 people checking their risk, which is where we are now, but we've got 1 million people to have done it by the end of next year, our 40th anniversary, and then 3 million people to have done it by 2030, because then they'll be the people who are stepping forward for an early diagnosis, saving money for the NHS, and living the lives that they should be. And that's where I'll finish. Please be part of this. By being our members, by being our volunteers, by coming to an event like this, you're part of our movement. We need you. You give us the credibility when we talk to government and ministers for you. And when we're successful in making these arguments, we can give people back the lives and the futures that they deserve. And that means no more broken bones and no more broken lives.
Thank you, Craig. Really interesting and a lot of food for thought there. Thank you so much for that. Just a quick reminder that we won't be able to answer specific medical questions in this session, but we will sort of, please do speak to our nurses if you need to. And like I did say earlier, we will come back to you with some of the answers to some of your questions along with the recording. So thank you for the questions that are popping up. That's great. And now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who Craig mentioned earlier, Dr. Caroline Songen. Dr. Songen has been passionate about research, and prior to joining the charity in 2014, she obtained a PhD in regenerative medicine and led several postdoctoral research projects at the University of Bath. At the ROS, she's a member of the Policy Research and Influencing team and is responsible for managing the research and innovation programme in line with ROS's strategy. She's actually achieved quite a lot since she's been here already, and during her time, she's managed a research grant portfolio of £1.3 million. She's led and developed the delivery of our initiative research roadmap, including a range of research prioritizations activities, and she's established novel mechanisms to optimise the facilitation of public and patient involvement in research. Caroline has also represented the charity on key external research groups within the sector. Caroline, over to you.
Thanks, Kathy. I will. Can we see that? Can I get a thumbs up, Kathy?
Yep, that's all good.
Great, thank you. Well, afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you about the research programme at the ROS and really put a spotlight on our objective at the moment, which is all about screening for high fracture risk. So to take you back to what really underpins our research programme is our research roadmap, which we published a few years ago. And this roadmap was developed with world-leading clinicians, academics, and also patient representatives. And one of the things that we really identified in our roadmap is that there is a gap to fill for research across the whole life course. So we know that if in our younger years, if we're able to maximise, build strong bones for life, later maintain that by consolidating our bone bank, and then in our later years minimise fracture risk, we can be on this orange line, which gives people an optimal bone health trajectory to lifelong healthy bones. But unfortunately, for those. Sometimes they end up on the impaired bone health trajectory, which can lead to osteoporosis and fractures. And that research can really be the key to sort of closing that gap, understanding all those different stages. And if we look at this graph and where there's the biggest gap, it's in terms of how we can reduce the bit where you're really wanting to minimize your fracture risk. And that's why, as an organization, we're always asking the big questions when it comes to research about how we can tackle this. And that's where screening comes in. So screening is all about identifying those early when they're in a position where you can intervene to alter the course. So you can push those from the blue line up to the orange line and hopefully help people have fracture-free, healthy aging. With that in mind, that is one of our objectives in our Breaking the Silence strategy, as Craig mentioned. So over the last few years, we've really been stepping up our efforts to prevent the first fracture through groundbreaking research to build the case for the world's first screening programme for high fracture risk. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about what led us as an organisation to set this as an objective. So the UK National Screening Committee is the organisation that's been, for the last 28 plus years, responsible for determining whether screening programmes implemented in the UK. It does this by setting really a high bar of criteria that has to be evidenced in order to show that a screening programme should work. They routinely, as an organisation, sort of review the evidence that's available for different conditions and make a recommendation. Back in 2019 was the last time the National Screening Committee reviewed osteoporosis, looking at whole population screening. And at the time, based on the evidence, it didn't meet enough of the criteria that they set. But what it did do was show actually there was potential benefits in terms of a targeted screening programme approach to reduce hip fractures. And between then and a few years later in 2022, what the National Screening Committee did was actually expand their scope. So as well as looking at whole population screening, they also set up specific criteria for looking at a targeted screening approach, which really speaks to where the evidence was starting to show for high fracture risk. Research is always emerging. So by 2022, there was even more evidence to support the case. And this was presented in our all-party parliamentary group of osteoporosis and bone health, which the ROS is a secretariat for. And in there, we recommended and we produced the evidence that showed the clinical case effectiveness of having a targeted screening programme was there from the evidence available. This was all picked up, and in the following year, in the Health in Ageing Society report by the Chief Medical Officer, it was even highlighted there that a reduction in hip fractures by targeted screening warranted further investigation. So all of this was building to the clinical cases there, the cost effectiveness cases there, the gaps that were remaining in the criteria is about how could it be implemented in real world settings. And within our whole, every aspect of our research programme, we always embed the patient voice. And we know from all the work that we've done in patient priorities activities, that early identification continues to be one of the top priorities from a patient perspective. So it seemed like a no-brainer for us as an organisation as where we should set our objective. So where are we now in terms of the place where we have no targeted screening programme in place? So what these triangles are to represent, so the pink triangle on the left, if you imagine this is all your population and you have a large number of people who are at low risk, sadly you have the top of this triangle, which is people that are at high risk. And what these people at high risk, unfortunately, translate to having a number of fractures, which is represented by the blue triangle. So without any targeted screening or identification of people at high risk of fracture, we're seeing a result in high numbers of fractures. And these include not only hip fractures, but all the different types of fragility fractures, including vertebral spinal fractures. Our APPG report as well showed that over 60% of people who are at high risk of fracture and should be being assessed aren't doing so at the moment. And this means people like Andrea and so many people that we hear from, are having multiple fractures when that early identification of them being at high risk could have prevented that. And not only prevented the actual fracture and the physical pain, but all the other associated things that affect a person's quality of life, and also the impact and burden it has on the NHS. So how could this picture look different if we had targeting screening program in place? Well, if we were to have a screening program where we did a pre-selection of people who were at high fracture risk, what we'd hope the outcome would be to essentially squash this triangle, to push people down to having a lower risk of fracture. And in reducing this risk, we'd reduce the number of fractures, again, benefiting the individuals and also NHS and the wider society. And when we think about what do I mean by screening, what would you expect to have? The evidence at the moment of the likely screening approach is about pre-selecting individuals using a fracture risk assessment tool, which is a calculation tool which takes lots of different data about people's risk factors, combined with a follow-up bone mineral density scan to give a probability of fracture risk. And it's the combination of a FRAX calculation and BMD measurement which been shown to provide the highest sensitivity. And this is really exciting because where we are at the moment with health and the NHS is all about digital. So the idea that you could pre-select people using a FRAX calculation tool that could be embedded digitally has real potential for not causing an overburden for having to implement this a type of screening approach. So I said we were going to step up our efforts. So what have we actually done? Well, last year, we set up a task and finish group. Again, whenever we do our research work, we bring together the experts that are not only experts in the UK, but they have international recognition as well in their field. We bring those together with the patient voice. So there's always that balance of discussion. And what we really wanted to do was to think about what could we do to get to where we want to get to. How are we going to get this work towards getting an established, filling those evidence gaps? And the approach that we did was to develop a theory of change. So I'm going to put up a picture of this. Please do not get your microscopes out to try and read the text. It's to just give you a visual overview, which I'll then talk through. But this looks like kind of a roadmap, like a tube map with lots of boxes connecting to each other. And so when we do our theory of change, so the dark blues on the far right-hand side are where we want to get to. So that's a screening program, a targeted screening program implemented. It'll cause a reduction in fractures, improve quality of life for people, reduce burden on the NHS. You then think about, so the orange boxes in here are all the activities we think about that we could do to work towards there. And then it's a case of sort of joining the dots. So if you do this, it will lead to this, and you make your picture. There's some pink boxes on here, so you consider when there's external things that you might be out of our control, but they could have an impact on what we're doing. And it's to really make sure that we've explored every possible activity or approach to getting to where we want to get to, and allow us to take that step back and look at where we should prioritise, because where we will have the biggest impact. So in terms of activities, so there's stuff that we do about the insight we gather to inform what we're going to do. And we've done this by engaging directly with the National Screening Committee, but also with other charities and organisations who have had success in getting targeted screening implemented, to really get as much learning as we can to inform what we do. Obviously, a very clear bit of activity is in terms of the research. As the only UK funder solely dedicated to osteoporosis and bone health research, we have a wealth of experience to really make sure we make the most of this to fill the gaps. And this can be funding research. It can be the work that we do in terms of helping to support proposals and generation of ideas, influencing other funders to prioritise this as a topic that they should fund as well. So obviously, if we can do everything we can do to sort of further the research field and fill those evidence gaps. But what we've learned from talking to other charities that work this, as well as having the actual evidence, the political influencing is equally as important and needs to happen in parallel. And as you've heard from Craig, we've established ourselves as a really strong influencing voice, which will marry up with all this other work doing. So it's a big picture, but it's but we think about everything that we could do and how best we can do it. So talking about the research, we launched a grants round. As I said, we're the UK sole funder of osteoporosis and bone research. So we launched a grants round focused on this. And earlier in the year, we invited applications. So researchers could apply to us for project grants of up to 100K. And what we would ask researchers to do was to develop a proposal which explicitly covered one of the National Screening Committee criteria and was one of the gaps existing in the evidence. We invited applications at the beginning of February, and we're working towards announcing the winners later this year. So to give you a flavour about, we invite a proposal. So how do we as an organisation decide on which projects or what we're going to fund? Well, to give you an overview of the process that we're currently in. So in February, at the beginning of the grants round, we invite applications, an expression of interest from researchers, and they're reviewed by our Research and Innovation Grants Assessment Panel, who oversee this entire process. And they, again, are made up of clinical and academic experts and patient advocates as well. They look at those applications in terms of alignment to the strategy and call, the scientific merit, the value for money, and the importance to people affected by the condition. From there, we triage them down to a smaller number, which get invited to submit a stage 2 application, which is a really full in-depth application of, has very in-depth research proposal, budget, justification of budgets, and all other sort of things we ask about. Those then get scrutinised by not only our panel, but also by 2 external experts in the field on that particular topic of the application. We get all these reviewers' comments back in, and we ask them for the reviewers, we set them specific questions for them to answer. We then invite the applicants to respond to any of the concerns raised by the reviewers, which helps to address any concerns or any areas that could be improved in the application. Once we have all that, we get to the final review, and that's where we're currently at the moment in this round, where in 2 weeks' time, we'll be bringing together our panel, all the reviewers' comments, the rebuttals, and discussing the applications to then make a recommendation of funding to the Board of Trustees, who then do the final funding approval. And the way that we do this, such a rigorous process, is because we're a really proud member of the Association of Medical Research Charities, which is the leading national organisation for all charities that fund medical research. It ensures that all of its members, because we have to adhere to certain guidelines, means that we're funding research of the highest standard, which is going to have the biggest impact. And we get audited regularly every 5 years, and we're really proud to hold a best practice in medical and health research peer review. And in the last audit, we were also commended on how we include the lay voice in our process, which as an organisation, as I said, that puts the patient voice at the heart, was really great to hear from an external sort of review. So this process, as I said, is really rigorous, and it's enabled as an organisation to fund over 110 research projects, investing over 6 million in research. And I just want to finish by talking through an example of a project that we've seen actually transition to making a difference and impact. So back in 2014, when we were the National Osteoporosis Society, we funded a project which looked at the impact of geographic and socioeconomic variation in the incidence of hip fracture and recovery on hip fractures. And this touches on what Craig mentioned about, we know that there's a different in places that are socially deprived, the care and the outcomes is much poorer. And this PhD project really put a spotlight on that. It generated a wealth of knowledge in the field and publications, 8 academic papers in total. It also supported the development of an early career researcher to gain a PhD qualification, which has advanced their career in the field of osteoporosis and bone health. But what we see quite often with our research investments, so that original grant was for about 79k. What we see is it's the catalyst. Our funding is often the catalyst to research taking that next step to securing funding. And in this case, securing 5-fold more funding, 400k from another funder. And that's where we see we really do make a difference in sort of those ideas and pushing it to the next step. The next step of this research, as I said, was them securing further funding, which allowed the research team at the University of Bristol to undertake the REDUCE project. So the project we initially funded showed there was the problem. The REDUCE project, which was all about reducing the unwanted variation in hip fracture care to give high quality hip fracture care across England and Wales. It was all about developing a toolkit. So identifying what were the barriers organisationally that hospitals and services could do to improve their services to stop that unwanted variation. And we continue to play a role in this project, not in a financial way, but we also have a mechanism at the charity where we support research in terms of our expertise, either clinical or through our public and patient involvement expertise. So we played a role in this project as a collaborator. This continued as a project to generate a wealth of data academically, and it got picked up in the media on the BBC, it's sort of showing as well how important this variation is and that it shouldn't be there. But what's brilliant is now there is the implementation toolkit, which is now freely available on the NHS, on the ROS website. So it's a really tangible demonstration of how our research has been, our funded research has been that golden thread leading to something that now we're seeing having really tangible, direct benefit for patients and people affected. It's going to be really exciting as we go on, we'll be able to evaluate and look at the impact of that toolkit and how it's being used. So that's a more recent example, but I've got so many other examples of how the difference that ROS research has made to people with osteoporosis and bone health problems. And our commitment has been record over the last 4 years. We've invested 1.2 million in our research programme to really make a difference. And this difference is only possible. We don't receive any government funding or anything for our research. It's only made possible due to the support we receive. So I hope today that you have a little bit better understanding of what we mean in terms of screening for high fracture risk and why we've decided to make that as an objective and how we're going to tackle that as an objective. And to hopefully give you some reassurance about the rigour that we do in determining what research we fund, because we really do understand that we need to make sure that the money that we are supported with is made to have the biggest impact it can possible. So I'd like to thank you all for listening. There's a lot more information on our website about some of our current projects. We can also contact the research team at research@ros.org.uk. There's a telephone number. If you're a member as well, you'll be able to see we have exclusive updates in our magazines with interviews with our researchers, which is always lovely to hear about how those projects are going on and the outputs of those. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. And I think, as Kathy said, there's questions that we shared, and we're really happy to answer those after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caroline. That was really fascinating to hear about the complexities of the research programme and also the real life sort of pathway of the research and the impact it's having on so many people. Thank you so much. I'm now going to introduce our next speaker, Susan Shuttle. Susan is a qualified solicitor and is a member of STEP and the Institute of Legacy Management. Before entering the charity sector, Susan started her career as a solicitor specialising in conveyancing, wills and probate. She also teaches law, including wills and probate, or all levels, all of which is really useful in her role as legacy manager at the ROS. Susan, I'm going to hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Kathy, can you see that?
I think it's, yes, I can.
Yeah, okay, lovely.
It's-
Thank you.
You might want to put it onto full screen though.
Okay, now did that work? Okay. Hello everyone. As Kathy's just introduced me, my name's Susan and I'm the Legacy Administration Manager, and today I'm going to talk to you about the importance of gifts in wills. So firstly, I'd just like to say thank you for supporting us, for being members and for joining us today. And before I talk about the importance of charitable gifts, I thought I might just talk a little bit about wills in general. So I've just put a couple of myths up on the slide that is something that I've heard numerous times over my career. So the first one is I have no assets, so I do not need to write a will. So it's quite a common.
Sorry to interrupt you. I think your screen's not on full, so we're not seeing the next slides.
Oh, apologies. Let me just see. I'm just going to try this again. Okay, can you see now?
And those, yes, we can. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, just to pick up. So
just
I have
back.
Oh no. Okay, I might just have to share it like this. I'm sorry, just to not hold things up. So I'll just try and enlarge this just to make it a bit more easier to see. So the first myth is I have no assets, I do not need to write a will. So I do hear this quite frequently, and I think it's important to remember that when you're looking at writing a will, it actually includes everything you own. So it's not just a house or land. Is actually your car, your bank accounts, your shares, your clothes, your jewelry, everything is actually dealt with when you write a will. The second myth is I've actually just told my family and friends where my estate is passing. And unfortunately, if you do not have a written will, then the government will dictate where your assets pass. They have passed legislation to ensure that if somebody passes away without a will, that they will direct where those where your assets actually go to. And the third one is I gave my assets away to avoid inheritance tax. I don't need a will. So I've heard this one quite often. And actually, I think it's quite important to think about a will, not just dealing with your affairs, but also dealing with inheritance tax as well. So it's always quite important to speak to a professional about the inheritance tax situation of giving away your assets, because it doesn't always necessarily avoid inheritance tax. I thought it might be quite useful as well just to talk about the contents of a will, so the types of gifts that you can leave. There are a few more than what's on this spreadsheet, but I thought it might be quite useful just to look at the main ones. So the first type of gift is a specific gift. So this is leaving a specific item to somebody. So it could be, in this example, I leave my painting to A, but it could also be I leave a necklace, anything really, anything that you own that's specific that you want to leave to somebody. The second type of gift that's quite common is the pecuniary gift. So leaving an amount of money. So I leave £10,000 to B, or any amount of money. And the third gift that's in every will is the residuary, or the residue. So that is everything that you own goes into a big pot, and any specific gifts, pecuniary amounts will come out, and then everything left will be in that pot, and you can leave it to whoever you want to. So the example here is I leave my estate to C and D equally, or it can be in different shares. So I thought that might be quite useful just to have a look at the contents of a will. The importance of charitable gifts in wills. Every gift large or small makes a huge difference to people affected, like yourselves, by osteoporosis. As Caroline stated, we do not receive any government funding, and this year 60% of our income will come from gifts in wills. All of the work that you've heard today from Craig and from Caroline will come, a lot of the funding will come from gifts that have been left to us. And without them, we would not been able to fund the fantastic and vital work that you've heard about today. I'm just going to play you a short video from Nick Vine. He is a lead advocate volunteer for the Royal Osteoporosis Society, and he has worked closely with Caroline as well. So I'm just going to hand that over to Kathy to play that video.
Hello, I'm Nick Vine, and I have osteoporosis. I'm leaving a legacy gift in my will to the Royal Osteoporosis Society because it's a wonderful charity, and I want to help it to continue being wonderful after I've gone. I was diagnosed with osteoporosis age 60, some 13 years ago, after a fall on the pavement, fractured my ribs. After the initial surprise, I decided I wasn't going to be defined or permanently worried by the condition, and I looked around for more information. I quickly found the National Osteoporosis Society, as it was then, and they were very helpful with information and advice. I also learned that osteoporosis is likely to affect 1 in 5 men over the age of 50, as well as 1 in 2 women. And whilst it was comforting to know I wasn't alone, I was astonished at the size of the population affected. A part of my coping approach was to get involved and learn even more. So I became a member of the society and started volunteering. I've been doing that now in various roles for 10 years, and I found it very rewarding. It certainly helped me to be more confident with my treatments and in my exercising. I haven't stopped doing things. I'm just a lot more careful to avoid falling over. I have had one fall, my stupid mistake, and fractured ribs again and shoulder blade. That was a painful lesson. I took bisphosphonate drugs for 12 years without a problem, and they have slightly improved my bone density. Without them, it would have continued to decrease. Her Majesty Queen Camilla is the Society's president, and it was Her Majesty's initiative to make it into the Royal Osteoporosis Society. I was privileged as a volunteer to be part of that transition, where the Society increased its focus on influencing and supporting research. And I've seen and benefited from the invaluable telephone helpline, the online information and advice, and the local support groups. The Society also does a huge amount of work supporting healthcare professionals in their bone health work, as well as funding research into effective prevention, faster diagnosis, and better treatments. And more recently, it's also been very effective in influencing government policy on funding for bone health services. All of these activities need a lot of money, and the charity is totally reliant on fundraising. I have 2 daughters and 2 grandsons, and I want all of them to walk tall through their lives, and I want the Royal Osteoporosis Society to be there for them if they need it. The Society's website has clear information on what to say in your will in order to leave a gift of money. For me, the legacy gift is the right thing to do for future generations.
Thank you, Kathy. I'll just share my last slide. So I'm just going to finish off today by talking about the National Free Wills Network. So we've partnered with them to offer you a free solicitor written will. There will be details of how you can obtain a pack that will be circulated after the webinar. You can also find your own solicitor on the Law Society's website, and obviously use your own solicitor if you already have one. If you have any questions about gifts or wills, then please do not hesitate to contact me. And finally, just thank you again for attending today and for your continued support. And I'm going to hand back to Kathy.
Thank you so much, Susan, for that, and to Nick, who so eloquently described his reason for leaving a gift to ROS in his will. We've come to the end of our session now for today, so I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully some of you may have been inspired to think about leaving a gift in your will so that we can fund the research, as Caroline described, to improve the lives of people living with osteoporosis and hopefully one day to find a cure. And also to be there for anybody needing information or support for generations to come. So thank you very much. We will send out the recording and answer as many questions as you can. Thank you.